Frank Meer stepped out of the sleek transport craft and into another world. The landing platform of Astralis Palace was nothing like the worn steel decks of Earth's carriers or the scarred tarmacs of forward bases. Here, everything shimmered. Crystal walkways stretched like veins of light, reflecting twin suns that bathed the alien capital in a soft, golden glow. Spires rose high into a lavender sky, each one sculpted from materials that seemed alive, their surfaces pulsing faintly, as if breathing. Suspended bridges of translucent stone curved gracefully between towers, carrying robed figures whose movements were smooth and deliberate, like dancers in an endless ritual. Frank's boots felt heavy on the platform, his black combat gear stark against the elegance around him. He adjusted the strap of his rifle, the weight familiar and grounding in a place that felt like a dream. Inside. The palace was another realm entirely. The halls glowed with soft bioluminescence, light spilling from veins in the walls that looked like frozen rivers of stars. The air carried a subtle scent, floral and metallic at once, something that spoke of a world far older and stranger than his own. Frank's eyes, trained to spot threats, took everything in, every corner, every balcony, every exit. Years of combat had sharpened his instincts into something close to second nature. This wasn't a battlefield, but his body treated it like one. Ambassador Thurin walked beside him, tall and composed, his silvery skin gleaming under crystalline chandeliers. The Ostan diplomat moved with calm grace, his voice smooth as water. "You seem tense, human," he said without looking at Frank, a hint of amusement in his tone. "This is a peaceful place. Our people have little need for weapons." Frank kept his gaze forward, his voice even. "With all due respect, sir, peaceful people don't usually need armed escorts." The corner of Thyron's mouth curved upward. "Peace," he said, "can be dangerous. Sometimes more than war." The words settled into Frank's mind like a grain of sand. He glanced at the guards stationed along the corridor. Their armor was decorative yet lethal, weapons folded neatly at their sides, but it was their eyes that told the truth, calculating, unsettled by the sight of him. Some nodded respectfully, others stared with something like suspicion. Humans were newcomers to this grand game of politics and alliances, but their reputation was already carved in history. Proxima, 1 fleet, 3 armadas. The whispers followed him everywhere, but Frank never wore them like trophies. They were just scars no one could see. They passed murals etched into glass walls, scenes of battles fought long before Earth ever touched the stars, alien kings, queens, and warriors immortalized in motion. There were always crowns in these stories, always. Thrones. The whispers began here too, carried by servants gliding quietly through the hallways. Soft words in a language Frank only partly understood, but he caught one name repeated more than once: Thindra, the Queen. The sound of it was like a chord struck deep, resonant and sharp. "She is different," Thurin said suddenly, as though reading Frank's thoughts. "Stronger than most. More careful too. There is a reason she asked for you." Frank arched a brow. "Me, I'm just here to keep her breathing." "Perhaps," the ambassador replied, a small smile on his lips. "But our queen believes humans have a certain unpredictability. She values that. Just be cautious. Old laws still hold power here, and they do not always bend easily." The words caught Frank off guard. "Laws?" Thurin only said, "You will see," and kept walking. The further they went, the more the palace seemed to unfold around them, each corridor brighter, each ceiling higher, until they reached a vast antechamber. Towering columns of pure crystal lined the space, each one catching the light in a way that made it feel alive. The floor was polished to a mirror shine, and Frank caught his reflection there, soldier. Black-clad, armored, rifle across his chest, an outsider in a world of elegance. He felt the weight of his gear like a shadow, but he also stood straighter. Habit, pride, discipline. At the far end of the chamber, Two colossal doors waited. They were carved with intricate designs, constellations woven into the metal like frozen lightning. Guards stood at either side, their posture flawless. One moved forward, voice clear but clipped. "The Queen will receive you now." Thyron gave a short nod. Frank's fingers twitched on the rifle strap out of habit, though his expression stayed calm. This was it, the reason he was here, the reason the whispers filled the air like static. He didn't know why, but something about the moment felt heavier than protocol, like a weight pressing on his shoulders. The doors opened with a sound like a sigh, and the world beyond stole his breath. The throne room stretched impossibly wide, its columns catching and scattering light, until it seemed they stood under a night sky full of living stars. Banners of deep crimson hung like captured fire, and between them, the throne itself, a creation of crystal and metal that looked almost grown, not built. And there she was, Queen Thindra, seated as if carved into the space, poised yet alive. Her skin shimmered like pale blue light, her hair a cascade of crimson waves that seemed to move of their own accord, catching glimmers from the room around her, and her eyes silver, bright and unyielding, locked on his. The moment he stepped in, the air changed, thicker, heavier. She didn't speak, not yet, but Frank felt the weight of her gaze like a pulse. Trained soldier though he was, his breath caught. There was power in her stillness, but something else too, something almost human. A story behind the crown. Asterisk. Frank kept his eyes forward, every nerve alive, as the grand doors closed behind him. The sound echoed like a vault ceiling, and suddenly, the throne room was silent, almost too silent. The Queen's gaze held him in place. He wasn't easily intimidated. He had stared down gunships, alien warlords, and death itself, but this was different. Queen Thindra was not just a ruler. She was presence itself. Her voice broke the quiet, clear and resonant. "Ambassador Thyron, you are welcome as always. And you, human soldier, are the one they call Frank Meer." It wasn't a question. She already knew. Frank gave a short nod, professional and steady. "Ma'am." Her lips curved the faintest fraction, amused perhaps at his earthbound manners. "Do humans always greet royalty like border guards?" Ambassador Thyron cleared his throat, silver skin catching the light. "Your Majesty, Frank is here as your protector, at the request of the Council." After Proxima, it was thought wise. "Proxima," she interrupted, silver eyes sharp. "Your species held a line when others fell. We do not forget such things." Then her gaze softened, only slightly. "But do not mistake this palace for a battlefield. We value life here." Frank almost smiled. "With respect, Your Majesty, someone out there disagrees." The words seemed to cut through the air. The Queen's head tilted just enough to suggest interest. "Explain." Before Thyron could smooth it over, Frank spoke. "When we landed, I saw your guard formations. Layered, overlapping, defensive. A palace this beautiful is built to impress, but it's also built to withstand. And someone stationed watchers on the upper balconies, hidden, but not enough." He glanced upward, casual, as though looking at the ornate carvings rather than the shadows. "If you're expecting peace, you wouldn't need eyes in the rafters." There was a beat of silence. Thyron looked uneasy. The guards at the doors shifted slightly, fingers near the triggers of their energy lances. But Thindra only watched him, and then she smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that was somehow more dangerous than any weapon. "Observant," she said. "It seems your reputation is not exaggerated." They moved on to matters of state. The ambassador spoke of trade, of treaties, of words that slid over Frank like water. He wasn't here to debate politics. He was here to watch the shadows. But something about Thindra kept pulling his attention. She didn't just listen. She commanded a room without trying. When she turned her head, the jeweled metal of her crown caught light like a sunrise. When she laughed softly at Thyron's joke, it was brief but genuine, and Frank could almost imagine her without the weight of the crown, and then it happened. A flicker, so slight most would miss it, a shimmer near the upper right balcony. Frank's instincts screamed. He didn't think, didn't ask. Down. His shout was raw and sharp, cutting through diplomacy like a blade. His boots hammered the crystal floor, rifle up as his body slammed into the queen's side, driving her down behind the steps of her throne. The world erupted. A searing bolt of plasma tore through the air where her head had been. The throne exploded into 1,000 shards of light, cascading like deadly glass rain. Guards shouted, moving too slow. Frank's rifle barked twice. The first shot cracked the cloaking field of the intruder. The second dropped the figure hard onto the polished floor. Purple blood spread in an unnatural bloom, the scent sharp and electric. The assassin twitched once, then stilled. The chamber froze. The nobles, the guards, the ambassador, stared at the human crouched protectively over their queen. Rifle, still smoking. Frank didn't look away from the shadows. Another one, he asked calmly, voice like steel. Thindra was silent beneath him, but he could feel the tension in her body. Not fear, not quite. Something else. Secure the room, she ordered finally, voice ringing out like a bell. No one enters, no one leaves. Soldiers scrambled, weapons hummed, but her gaze was fixed on him. When they were alone enough to breathe, she stood, her gown torn slightly where he'd grabbed her. She looked at him not with anger, but with something colder, sharper. "You saved my life," she said quietly, as if testing the weight of it. Frank shrugged, lowering his rifle, but not relaxing. "Doing my job." "Not anymore," she replied. Her eyes burned silver fire. "By the oldest law of Astralis, when the queen's life is saved, she owes the savior one wish. Anything, Frank Meer, name it." There was a ripple of disbelief among the remaining courtiers, like wind through tall grass. The air felt heavier. Frank could feel every gaze on him, every muscle tense. He hesitated only a breath, scanning her face. Strength, isolation, pride. Then, with the blunt honesty of a soldier who knew his own heart, he said, "I wish to be with you, Your Majesty." The room went silent. Her face shifted from shock to fury, to something unreadable. Her blue skin deepening with heat. "You dare?" she began, but the law was spoken. The words could not be withdrawn. Her hand cut through the air like a blade. "Guards, take him to my chambers. Now." Thyron's expression was a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. But Frank only let the corner of his mouth tilt in a ghost of a smile. He had faced battles that shook worlds, but something told him this was the one that would change everything. Frank's boots sank slightly into the soft floor of the royal corridor as the guards led him away. The walls here were alive with light, thin veins of glowing crystal tracing patterns like constellations. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made his soldier instincts itch. The queen's order still rang in his head, sharp and undeniable. "Take him to my chambers." It wasn't anger. He feared anger. He could handle. It was the uncertainty in her silver eyes, the kind of controlled power that could crush or forgive with the same gesture. The guards didn't speak. They walked like shadows, disciplined, their weapons folded, but ready. Frank could feel their tension, the small movements of fingers near triggers. They didn't know what to make of him. Was he a savior or a threat? His request had shaken, something ancient, something older than politics. When the corridor ended, the doors before them slid open without a sound. The queen's private chambers were unlike anything Frank had ever seen. They were vast but intimate, lit by soft pulses from the walls. Colors shifted slowly, reflecting mood and motion, a living organism of architecture. A wide window revealed the capital city below, crystal spires glowing like lanterns under twin moons. But what caught his attention most wasn't the beauty, was the weapon rack hidden behind an art panel, proof that even queens prepared for war. The guards stopped, unsure whether to enter. Then her voice came from inside, low but firm. "Leave us." They hesitated, glancing at one another, but she stepped into view, crimson hair like molten silk, silver gaze bright as a blade. I said, "Leave us." They obeyed, the doors sealed, with a whisper, and suddenly it was just the two of them. Frank stayed still, rifle slung but ready, his stance easy but alert. She moved closer, her gown flowing around her like water. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked, voice calm but edged. "I exercised the right your laws gave me," Frank said, tone level. "You mocked one of our oldest traditions," she countered, circling him slowly. "You could have asked for land, power, ships, knowledge, anything, but you asked for me. Do you think I am some prize?" Her words stung, but Frank kept his gaze steady. "No, I think you're someone who carries more weight than anyone should, and I think you're alone." That stopped her. For a moment her steps faltered, so slight it might have been missed. She turned sharply to face him, silver eyes narrowed. "You presume much." "I see a commander when I look at you," Frank said quietly. "The weight of command is the same on every world. I've seen it break men twice my size." She tilted her head, studying him. There was no softness, not yet, but something shifted. "So this is pity, admiration," Frank corrected, "and maybe something more reckless. Humans are good at reckless." For a long moment, she said nothing. The walls around them shifted to a faint, warm glow, as if the chamber itself was listening. Finally, she asked, almost curious, "You do realize what your wish means? By our laws, it binds you to me. Not as a guard, not as a guest, as a companion. The court will hate it. They will hate you. You could be executed for less." "But you won't do that," Frank said simply. Her brows lifted slightly. "Why not?" He stepped closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. "Because you brought me here, alone, when you didn't have to. And because you're curious." A spark lit in her gaze, something sharp but not hostile. "You are either impossibly bold or very stupid." "Both," Frank said with a faint grin. "It's a human specialty." She didn't smile, but he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. The smallest crack in her armor. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the chamber. Lights shifted to crimson, cutting the softness of the moment. A guard's voice came through the "Your Majesty, there's been a breach in the western wing. Unknown signatures." She straightened instantly, all softness gone. "Seal the palace. Activate the defense lattice." She turned to Frank, already moving toward the hidden armory. "You wished to be with me. Then stay close. Tonight, we find out if you survive it." Frank tightened the strap on his rifle, following her to the panel as weapons shimmered into view. "Now you're speaking my language." Asterisk, Frank followed, thindra down a narrow service corridor hidden behind the glowing walls of her chamber, the hum of security systems vibrating faintly through his boots. The palace was alive now, alarms pulsed red, defense fields snapping into place outside the crystalline windows. Voices crackled over coms and clipped, urgent tones. He moved close, rifle ready, senses wide open. Beside him, the Queen's calm was unnerving. Her long strides were precise, her crimson hair catching the emergency lights like sparks. "Western wing breach," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "Too close to the diplomatic halls. This is no random act." "You've seen something like this before?" Frank asked, scanning every junction. "Not since the succession wars," she replied. "But those days are supposed to be over. Someone wants us to remember otherwise." The corridor opened into an armory that looked more like a gallery. Racks of weapons lined the walls, alien rifles with curved barrels, pulse lances glowing faint blue, bladed tools with edges like frozen light. Thindra moved without hesitation, selecting a sleek rifle and an energy shield that expanded with a flick of her wrist. She tossed another rifle toward Frank. He caught it, testing its weight. Lighter than his M4, but it hummed like something alive. "You trust me with your toys? You saved my life once today," she said, adjusting her shield. "I trust your aim, for now." Their eyes met for a beat too long. Then a voice broke the moment. Ambassador Thyron overcomes, his tone strained. "Your Majesty, unknown hostiles have bypassed the outer gates. They're using stealth tech we can't track." 3 signatures inside the palace. Frank's instincts tightened. Stealth tech. Sounds like Proxima design. Thindra's silver eyes flicked toward him. "Explain." "It's older tech, but deadly. Used in the war. Cloaks them until they move fast or fire." Someone got their hands on restricted gear. He checked the rifle's power cells. And someone on the inside helped them get this far. She didn't argue. She simply said, "Follow me." They moved fast, through corridors that twisted like veins through a living heart. Each turn revealed more of Astralis's strange beauty that shifted color with mood, statues that seemed to breathe, but none of it mattered now. Tension coiled tight. Frank scanned constantly, seeing every flicker, every shadow. When they rounded a corner into the western hall, it was chaos. Guards stood at defensive points, weapons raised, but they were nervous. The air shimmered faintly near the balcony, like heat waves. "There," Frank said sharply. "Right side, above the 3rd pillar." Without hesitation, Thindra fired. The pulse hit empty air and something flickered, a distorted silhouette twisting away. The hall erupted in sound shots fired, plasma bolts streaking like lightning. Frank dropped low, his movements automatic, the alien rifle an extension of his arms. 2 hostiles broke cloak, sleek black armor hugging their frames. Frank's first shot hit one center mass, sending it crashing into the wall. The second came fast, dodging, firing back with a silent flash. The bolt seared close to thin shield, heat, cracking the crystal tiles. She moved like water, stepping forward with an elegance that belied the weapon in her hands. Frank covered her flank, firing bursts to force the second hostile back. A voice barked through the Cumlord Commander Th, anger sharp. "My queen, remove yourself to the secure vault, now." "Negative," she snapped. "I will not hide." Frank almost smiled despite himself. "You really don't make this easy. Would you prefer me docile?" She shot back, dropping another pulse into the balcony. Frank grinned grimly. "Not my style." The fight lasted minutes, though it felt like hours. Finally, the last hostile faltered, cloak flickering as it tried to retreat. Frank took the shot, clean and final. The body dropped, and the hall went silent except for the hum of failing stealth fields. Guards moved in, securing the fallen. The queen lowered her rifle slowly, breathing even, but Frank saw the tightness in her jaw. "This was organized," he said, scanning the weapons on the floor. "Gear like this doesn't show up by accident. Someone wanted you dead. Again." She turned to him, and for a moment the weight of her crown seemed heavier. "They will try again, and worse. You chose to bind yourself to me, Frank Meer. Now you will see what that means." He slung the alien rifle across his shoulder, the faint glow painting shadows across his face. "I've seen war, but I've never seen this. Lead the way, Your Majesty. I'm not leaving your side." Her gaze softened, just a fraction. "Good. Because the deeper we go, the more dangerous the truth becomes." A distant explosion rumbled through the palace, shaking dust from the high crystal beams. Alarms wailed again. "That," Frank said, tightening his grip, "sounds like only the beginning." Frank barely had time to tighten his grip on the alien rifle before the next tremor hit. It rolled through the crystal floor like a living thing, sending faint cracks of light rippling under their boots. The queen's calm face barely changed, but Frank saw the flicker in her silver eyes, a spark of something sharper than fear. That came from the diplomatic wing, she said, already moving. How many dignitaries are here tonight? Frank asked, scanning the hall as they moved. Too many, Thindra replied. Half the council, the Proxian ambassador, minor lords. If someone wanted to cause chaos, they chose well. The corridors shifted as they ran, the palace itself, reconfiguring a system designed for defense. Walls sliding silently into new positions, doors sealing, paths opening only for the queen's palm. Frank followed, watching the technology adjust to her touch, the alien rifle warm in his hands. As they turned into a side passage, Ambassador Thyron's voice came through the comms, urgent and tight. Your Majesty, the Proxian ambassador is missing. His escort was found incapacitated. We believe he was intercepted before arrival. An unknown shuttle docked minutes ago under false credentials. Frank swore under his breath. It's not just assassination, it's framing. Someone wants to start a war. Purists, Thindra said grimly. There have been whispers. Fanatics who believe old bloodlines must remain pure. They would destroy everything rather than see change. And my wish didn't help calm them down, Frank muttered. Her gaze slid to him as they ran, a fleeting glint of dry amusement. You are a spark in a chamber full of fuel, Frank Meer. But they were planning this long before you asked for me. They burst into another corridor. This one lined with statues of old monarchs, each face carved with regal pride, each crown a reminder of weight and history. Thindra paused, her hand brushing the hilt of a ceremonial blade resting on a pedestal. Frank slowed too, scanning their surroundings. You think there's someone inside, feeding them intel? There has to be, she said. Our systems were bypassed with precision. Someone knows this palace better than I do. A soft, metallic click broke their exchange. Frank spun, rifle up. A shimmer in the corner of the hall resolved into a figure, half-phased, cloak flickering. The shot came silent but deadly, plasma slicing the air. Frank shoved Thindra hard, the bolt slamming into the statue instead, blowing shards of crystal across the corridor. He fired without hesitation. A single clean burst. The hostile crumpled, cloak failing completely. Black armor, no insignia. Thindra stared at the fallen figure. Her voice was quiet but cold. My own walls have traitors. Frank's jaw tightened. Not just traitors. Extremists. And they're not stopping until they prove their point. Footsteps echoed more guards, and among them, Lord Commander, Th. Face like carved stone. He bowed quickly. My queen, the Western archives are compromised, and we've confirmed something. His words faltered when his gaze swept to Frank, with respect. Why is the human still armed? Because he's the reason I'm alive, Thindra snapped. And because your guards failed twice tonight. That silenced him. Commander, who's behind this? Frank demanded. Lord Th's expression tightened. The tech we've recovered is Proxian in design, but modified. This isn't just a theft. It's an alliance. Humans, Proxians, even a few Australians, a splinter faction, calling themselves the Purists. Frank swore again, low and sharp. You mean they want to drag every species back into the dark? Thindra stepped closer to the commander. Double security on the council chambers. No one moves without my authority. And bring me the assassin's gear. The commander hesitated, then gave a short nod. As you wish. When he left, the queen turned to Frank. Someone is using our own traditions against us. The wish law, the old treaties, everything is being twisted. Frank met her gaze. Then we untwist it, starting with whoever's helping them. They moved again, this time toward the secure archives. The halls narrowed, the palace heartbeat slowing to a tense rhythm as they approached the last corner. Frank's hand brushed hers by accident. She didn't flinch. For a moment, there was no alarm, no war, just the warmth of her hand, the strange familiarity of her presence. She looked at him briefly, her voice lower now. You risked your life for me twice tonight. And still you asked for something no man has dared to ask. Why? He didn't hesitate. Because you were worth asking for. Something flickered in her silver eyes, not amusement, not anger, something more dangerous. But the moment was cut short. The archive doors opened to a rush of cold air and light. Inside, screens and crystalline consoles lit up, and in the center, a tall figure waited, robes flowing like shadow. It was Master Prell, the etiquette instructor.com/collected. His hands folded, his expression unreadable. Your Majesty, he said, voice smooth. I wondered how long it would take you to arrive. Frank leveled his rifle. You're not supposed to be here. On the contrary, Prell said, his lips curling. I have always been here, teaching you how to bow, how to speak, how to hold a spoon, while you never once looked at the hand that guided yours. His smile turned cold. Do you want to know why the wish tradition exists? It is not about honor. It is about control. And you, human, just broke it. Thindra's breath caught, not from fear, but fury. Prell, Your Majesty, he said softly, almost kindly. It is too late to stop what we began. A tremor shook the room. Alarms flared again. The wall screens lit with unfamiliar codes. Frank tightened his grip. He's stalling. Something else is coming. And Prell's final words before the lights cut were like ice. Long live the purists. The room plunged into darkness for a heartbeat, then burst alive with emergency red. Every crystal panel flared crimson, casting sharp shadows across the archive. Frank moved fast, pivoting to cover Thindra's flank, his alien rifle humming softly. Master Prell stood unmoving, robes whispering around his boots, the glow from hidden screens painting his face in ghostly light. Purists, Thindra said, her voice low, vibrating with restrained fury. You dare bring treason into my halls. Prell's mouth curved in something too calm for the moment. Your halls were hours long before you wore that crown. You think the wish law was about gratitude? It was always about selection bloodlines. Only the strongest could ever save a queen. Only the worthy would stand close enough to claim a wish. It kept our kind pure. Frank took a step forward, rifle leveled. Sounds like a self-serving fairy tale. What you're really saying is, you're scared. Scared of change. Scared of something new. Prell's gaze slid to him, cold and unhurried. And what are you, human? A soldier pretending at love. A trespasser who thinks one reckless moment makes him chosen. Reckless works, Frank said. It's why you're standing here explaining yourself instead of winning. Prell's smile vanished. You should not have come here. Your very presence is the crack in the foundation. A low tremor ran under their feet. The walls shimmered like disturbed water. Alarms screamed in a higher pitch. The palace's systems, struggling. Prell's voice dropped to something almost reverent. They're here. My people are already at the power core. Your palace will burn, and the galaxy will believe humans and Proxians conspired to kill a queen. Thindra stepped closer, silver eyes burning. You think this city will fall? You think I will? You will bend, Prell said. Or you will be broken. Before he could move, Frank fired. The shot struck the floor at Prell's feet, sending shards scattering. You don't get to decide that. You had your chance to talk. Prell looked almost disappointed. Even now, you don't understand. This isn't about killing you. It's about erasing you. Guards swarmed in then, Lord Commander, at their lead. We've sealed most of the palace, but there's fighting. In the lower levels, the power core is compromised. Take him, Thindra ordered, her voice cold steel. But Prell only smiled again, as if the order was irrelevant. You cannot stop an idea. Not with walls, not with soldiers, and certainly not with this. His gaze flicked between them, his disdain obvious. Frank's hands tightened. Enough. Thindra turned to Move him to high security. Double the watch. and commander. She hesitated only a second. Trust no one. Prell was dragged away, but even as he left, his words floated behind him. The wish that binds will also break. Silence swallowed the archive. For a moment, only the hum of ancient systems remained. Thindra turned to Frank, and the edge in her eyes softened. He's not wrong about one thing. They fear what they cannot control. And right now, that's us. Frank let out a slow breath. We need answers. Who's funding them? Who's supplying Proxian tech? Who's feeding them intel? This isn't just palace politics anymore. She moved to a central console, her fingers dancing over the keys. Holograms bloomed around the maps, codes, data streams. These archives hold records older than our dynasty. If they infiltrated this deep, it means they were after something more than sabotage. One of the holograms changed, scrolling rapidly. Frank leaned closer. Ancient star charts, genetic diagrams, old sealed files. And then a name blinked across the projection. What is that? He asked. Thindra's hands stilled. The first queen, Sarah Jenkins. Frank frowned. That's a human name. It is more than a name, Thindra said softly. Long before your people knew the stars, one of your kind ruled here. She saved our tribes, united them. The wish law began with her, and we buried that truth to protect it. Frank stared at the shimmering data, mind racing. You mean, your bloodline started with us? It means, Thindra said, meeting his eyes, our peoples were never meant to be separate. The weight of it pressed into the room, something vast and electric. Before Frank could answer, the door slammed open. Admiral Jenkins stood there, weathered face tight. Your Majesty, Frank, we don't have time. The purists are moving faster than we thought. They've taken control of outer defenses. They're trying to trigger a chain reaction at the power core, and they've deployed something worse. Sold war drones. Frank's body tightened like wire. How many? Too many, Jenkins said. But there's more. That genetic link you just uncovered. It changes everything. It's why they're afraid. A union between your species could unify more than politics. It could unify blood. Thindra's hand went unconsciously to her abdomen. She froze, then slowly dropped it, as if unsure whether she meant to. Frank caught the movement. What? Her? Gaze held his. I suspected after the first tests. But seeing this, she hesitated, and for the first time, Queen Thindra looked unsure. Frank, I think your wish has already changed more than either of us realized. Admiral Jenkins stepped forward, urgency slicing through the moment. Save the talk for later. We need you both. Now, the purists are ready to finish this. Frank slung the alien rifle over his shoulder, stepping toward the queen. His voice was steady. Then let's finish it first. She looked at him. Alien queen, human soul. Something like a smile touched her lips, brief but real. Together, they left the archives side by side, the palace shaking again, as somewhere deep below. The enemy made their move. Asterisk, the palace shook like a living thing, as Frank and Thindra raced through its veins of crystal and light. Alarms bled. Together, a rising pulse that made every step feel like a countdown. Guards fell in behind them, but the queen barely acknowledged them. Her attention was forward, silver eyes burning with purpose. Frank kept pace at her side, alien rifle warm in his hands. The weight of everything pressing in, the coup, the purists, the secret they'd just unearthed. Admiral Jenkins moved with the quick, economical steps of a man who had led to many emergency evacuations. The power core is deep below the palace, he said, voice clipped. If they destabilize it, this city won't just fall. It will burn through half the sector. Frank's jaw tightened. How many are down there? At least a dozen, Jenkins replied, plus automated defenses they've hijacked. And they know the queen is on the move. Good, Frank said. Let them know who's coming. They reached a spiral descent, where the crystalline walls glowed brighter with each step. as though the palace itself was awake. Thindra paused once, her hand pressing to a panel. "This is the heart of Astralis," she said quietly. "Every ruler has stood here before a crisis, but none stood with a human at their side." Frank glanced at her, the sharp edges of battle softening for a breath. "You're not alone anymore." Her silver gaze lingered on him, and then she nodded. "Let's make sure we have a future to argue about." They moved faster. The corridors narrowed, heat rising from below. When they broke through the final security door, chaos met them. The power cord chamber was vast, a column of living crystal, humming with blinding energy. Catwalks stretched like fragile threads, and among them, black armored figures moved with deadly precision. Gunfire erupted instantly. Bright plasma streaked across the chamber, splashing against walls. Thin shield flared as bolts struck, and Frank's rifle barked back, clean bursts, dropping two enemies before they could react. The noise was deafening, but he could hear his heart, steady and hard. "Cover left," she called, and he moved without thinking, covering her flank as she pressed forward. They moved like they had been born for this, step for step, shield and rifle, instinct and trust. The purists fought like zealots. Each one fell without hesitation, but more took their place. And then the drones came sleek silver and fast, cutting through the air with precision fire. "Jenkins," Frank barked, "working on it." The Admiral shouted back, fingers flying over a portable console, trying to override the system. "But someone's inside the code. They locked me out." Thindra dropped to one knee, pulling a small device from her belt, her voice calm despite the storm. "Our systems respond to bloodline. If they have a traitor, we need something stronger." Frank moved to cover her, firing in controlled bursts, but even as he shot, he knew they were running out of time. The power core's hum was changing, rising in pitch like a scream. A voice cut through the chaos bells from hidden speakers, smooth, calm, infuriating. "You can kill the soldiers, you can break the machines, but you cannot stop what's coming. We built this on purpose. The wish law was meant to keep us apart, and you have shattered it." Frank fired at the nearest speaker, sparks flying. "I'm done listening to you." Thindra looked up then, her face illuminated by the glow of the core. "He's right about one thing," she said. "They designed this palace to obey only its rulers, but it never expected to." She reached for him, her gloved hands slick with dust and heat. "Your hand, Frank." He didn't hesitate. His palm met hers, and for an instant, the world changed. The crystal walls blazed white, the floor lit under their feet. Energy rushed through them like a river, connecting flesh to machine, mind to stone. Frank could feel her pulse, her focus, and something else, something new and small, a warmth that wasn't just hers. The palace responded. Turrets reoriented, drones froze mid-flight, hostiles staggered as if struck by an unseen force. Energy shields blossomed like petals, locking down the chamber. "You're controlling it." Jenkins breathed, wide-eyed. "We're not just controlling it," Frank said, his voice strange in his own ears. "We're rewriting it. Together." They sent commands, shutting down the sabotage, isolating the purists. The core's rising whine softened, then steadied, bright but stable. Alarms faded one by one. When it was over, the chamber was quiet. Only the faint hum of the heart of Astralis remained. The captured purists were silent, bound by crystal restraints that had grown like roots. Thindra released his hand slowly, but her fingers lingered. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. They were right to be afraid, not because of war, because of this. Frank smiled, tired but certain. They should be, because this isn't just politics anymore. Admiral Jenkins approached, face lined with relief. "We'll interrogate the survivors, clean up the rest. The galaxy is already talking. Feeds everywhere. They saw you fight side by side. They saw the core answer to you both. Thindra's hand drifted once more to her abdomen, almost unconsciously. Frank noticed, his smile softening. "So, it's true," he said. She met his gaze. "I don't know what it will mean, but I know she heeds. They will change everything." Jenkins cleared his throat, but his voice was warmer now. "Let's save the celebrations for the wedding. The council is already planning a summit. You've both rewritten history tonight." Later, after the purists were locked away and the fires were out, Frank stood with Thindra on a high balcony. The city below shimmered under 3 moons, repaired walls still glowing faintly. Her hand found his, quiet and sure. "You saved me," she said softly. "You saved me back," he replied. "Guess we're even." "Not quite," she said, turning to him with that same fierce light in her eyes. "You asked for me when you could have asked for anything. Remember that." "I will," he said, and kissed her, slow and certain, as the palace lights pulsed in silent applause. Months later, when their daughter was born, tiny fingers, mismatched eyes, a smile that lit every crystal in the room, they named her Sarah Luminara Meer, the first child of 2 worlds, proof of a promise kept and a future dared. Frank would often think back to that moment in the throne room, the audacity of his wish, and every time he looked at Thindra and their child, he knew it had been the only choice that mattered.